start. Hello, everyone. Good morning, or actually good afternoon in New York, and good evening in Europe, and maybe even good morning in Asia, wherever you hail to join us in that conversation with two artists, Olia Fedorova and Kavelina, featured in the exhibition Women at War, currently on view at Fridman Gallery in New York City. This exhibition features the works by some of the most accomplished women artists working in Ukraine today. And the two of them are with us on Zoom. We are particularly sorry that we can't have them with us in New York. But that conversation is precisely for the reason to give them voice, to allow them to speak about their works, about their thoughts, about their ideas in their own words. So I hope that you will also brew questions as we go. The Q&A session is open. You can place your questions there, and Emma Knape from Fridman Gallery will be preparing those questions, sorting them for the Q&A that will crown our conversation. We are aiming at going for about an hour, a little bit over it, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. Who has to go earlier has to go. Who can stay with us longer, please stay. And of course, this conversation is being recorded and it will be available on our websites later on. I shall probably introduce myself. My name is Monika Fabijanska and I am the curator of the exhibition. I've curated several feminist exhibitions in New York City in the past few years. That's my field of specialty. And I am very, very, very happy, very privileged that together with Fridman Gallery, we could work on this very special project in a moment that asked for some kind of action and representation of Ukrainian culture in New York City. So I will share my screen now to show you a few images from the gallery so that you can see how the exhibition looks like. That's what happens if we are for too long in a session where we try things out. I went through them before. So as I will show you the images from the installation, I will introduce both artists reading their biographies, and then we will go straight into the conversation. So going alphabetically, Olia Fedorova was born in 1994 in Kharkiv and is a conceptual artist who works with performance, photography, video, and text. She graduated from the Kharkiv State Academy of Design and Fine Arts in 2016. She was the winner of the Nathan Altman Contemporary Visual Art Contest in Vinica in 2017, a finalist of Ukrainian Biennial of Young Artists in Kharkiv 2019, and Muki, Young Ukrainian Artists in Kiev. Solo exhibitions include Municipal Gallery in Kharkiv, Contemporary Art Center Tea Factory Odessa, and several galleries in Kharkiv, Kiev, and Dnipro, all cities in Ukraine. Group exhibitions include I View 2, organized by Video City Electronic Billboard at the Congress Center Basel in Switzerland in 2022, Association for Contemporary Art in Graz 2020, Bruderschaft Project, supported by the German Embassy in Ukraine, in Kiev, Kharkiv, and Dnipro, International Winterland Art Festival Mythogenesis in Nemyriv in Ukraine, and Museum of Ideas in Lviv. Fedorova participated in many artist residency programs, including in Mariupol, Ukraine, in the UK, Austria, Germany, and Poland, as well as online art residencies during the COVID-19 pandemic, which included Koike Arts Living Space in Tokyo and American Arts Incubator Residency organized in collaboration of Isolation Fund in Kiev and 01 in San Francisco. Olia Fedorova has lived and worked in Kharkiv, and since May of this year, she has been a refugee in Graz in Austria. These are Olia's works in the exhibition, this photograph, and in the image before, the textile that you see on the left-hand side. We will be discussing them in this conversation. And now on screen are drawings by Dana Kavelina, who was born in 1995 in Melitopol, and who works primarily with animation and video, but also installation, painting, and graphics. She graduated from the Department of Prints at the National Technical University of Ukraine. Her works often address military violence and war seen from gender perspective, especially with regard to the position of a victim as a political subject, as well as the distance between historical and individual trauma and memory and misrepresentation. Her works were exhibited at the Museum Folkwang Essen in 2022, MAXI, Museo Nazionale delle Arti del 21st Century. How do you say that in Italian? I forgot. In Rome, Zionkirche in Berlin, Christianstadt Kunsthalle in Sweden, Kmytov Museum of Soviet Art in Ukraine, and Closer in Kiev. Kavelina's films were screened at the Castello di Rivoli Museo d'Arte Contemporanea in Rivoli, Turin in Italy, in HKW Berlin, ICA Los Angeles, and the Museum of Modern Art in New York. Her animated film Mark Tulip, Who Spoke with Flowers, received a special jury mention at the 2019 Odessa International Film Festival and the Grand Prix of the 2018 Krok Animation Festival in Kiev. Kavelina was based in Kiev and Lviv, Ukraine. Since March 2022, she has been a refugee in Germany. And that's shot into the room in our gallery downstairs where we screen Dana's film, A Letter to Turtle Dove. So now I can stop sharing my screen. Everybody has visited the show, and we can start our conversation. So why don't we start from discussing your works in the show? Let's maybe start. Who wants to start? Who wants to go first? Olia smiles. Olia go first, alphabetically.
Yeah, sorry for this intrusion, unexpected one. Yeah, I would start. Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Monika, and thank you for inviting me to this show. I'm really happy to be presented in such a great company of artists, my colleagues. So yeah, and also thank you for giving us Ukrainian artists a voice during these times. I consider it's very important in terms of our mutual fight during this war. So I would share my screen where I show these works. Yep, hope you can see the same photo that you showed exhibited in the gallery. So this one is very important for me actually, because it was one of my first artwork among the landscape, like environmental something. I called it. It can be a sculpture or like invasion into the environment with some object, which I practice a lot. And this was made during my participation in the Winter Land Art Festival, Mythogenetics, that you mentioned. It is held near Vinnytsia in central Ukraine every winter, except this one. So I made the paper sculptures in form of anti-tank hedgehogs, and it was I installed them in this snowy landscape, and it was interesting for me to play with this controversy between the form and material, and between the ideas that are associated with this form, because since 2014, when the war actually started. The anti-tank hedgehogs and this form became very like integrated into like Ukrainian reality, and having them in paper made me think of like how vulnerable actually we are, how this state of being at war all during these times, yeah, it's really cannot be defended. Like it cannot be defended with this like with any stuff like hedgehogs, like Czech hedgehogs, because it's something that is very toxic, this war situation, even though like before February 24th, there wasn't like full-scale invasion, and in some parts of Ukraine, the war couldn't be even felt. But I guess we all had it in our souls, in our minds, and trying to escape from the war was like the same, like trying to protect yourself with paper hedgehogs against full metal tanks. And yeah, the fact that they were melting gradually during like the day, there was the freezing day, and the humidity of snow make them decompose at the end of the festival. So it was kind of very symbolical thing for me. Yeah, should I talk about the other work of this show?
No, let's switch to Dana. But before we do that, let me ask you, what is this festival exactly? Can you tell us towards more about the festival itself? Is it outdoor sculpture, or is it a performance festival?
It's a land art in a very broad meaning. Land art festival where people, artists who do sculptures, who do performances, and like more classic land art, they all participate in it. And actually, like it has been like held for more than 10 years already, and it's unique because it's winter land art festival. It's not some kind of land art festivals usually do, because of the conditions, temperature and stuff. And also what is remarkable about this festival is the very location, because it's an ancient Scythian fortress. So it has 1,000 years of history, and all like these hills that you see, it's the remains of their fortifications that they made of soil. And when you it's around, it's like a circle around this very plain space with a lake inside, which always used to have ice on that, and a lot of people, a lot of artists did ice sculptures, and yeah, it has really special atmosphere there. So
thank you. Thank you. Yes, I think it was really important for us to hear that. Yeah. I have to tell you that I selected this work because not only did I just loved it immediately, instantly, but I thought it would really have the sympathy of American viewers who are where land art is such an important historical genre in American art, and it really is a very poetic take on all this, and also very feminist maybe take on those huge structures. Here there is this intervention in landscape is very minimalist. There is no trace that will stay and pollute or change the landscape in any way. Yep. And it was also a way to bring the Ukrainian land into the exhibition, to have a window into Ukraine, which is such a beautiful country. And I thought that this work provided just that it's hanging near the window, so even people passing by the street can peep into the winter landscape of Ukraine. Dana, will you tell us a little bit about your series of drawings, or the overarching idea behind them?
Yeah, of course. Shall I start with demonstrating my screen?
Sure.
Yeah. For last several years, I was occupied with doing one big project that was considered to be a full feature film, or rather a video installation. But as I started it 4 years ago, I started with doing drawings and writing a poetical text. And I started this work from researching war rape. And from this research, and in these drawings, I tried to shift the perspective on wars to a radical gendered perspective. And I try to show rape not as some uncomfortable consequence of wartime, but rather as the essence of war, its only content. And in this series of drawings, I also try to reveal the ultimate logic of war rape and reveal its multiple purposes that can be considered a weapon of war as well. For example, when it concerns the so-called ethnical damage of a woman's body, also remembering that many of women raped in Bosnia and also in all other wars as well, it's just that I researched Bosnia a lot, have given birth to children which were children of the enemy. That makes a lifelong impact on a woman doing this. And also here I see the difference of speeds of the diplomatic process and the war process on the ground. And also outspeaking and criticizing war from a gendered perspective opens the space for undermining any heroization that is coming after the war, because any monument erected to a hero has its shadow, and in this shadow lie all these bodies that were damaged in the times of war. And all the voices that are constantly silenced in order to preserve this, the glorification of the victorious people or state. And when I finished the series of drawings, they were shown in Kmytov Museum of Soviet Art. And the exposition was also a very important point for me, because the drawings were placed in between the big Soviet drawings that were mostly glorifying the war, the history of war, while the small and maybe fragile looking papers were there to get into a dialogue, to reveal this shadow. And of course, as we know, Russian army uses mass rape also as a weapon of war right now. And I think that we will have a lot of work concerning how would we code this history, how would we preserve this memory in the way not to leave these blind spots, because the blind spots are constantly used to manipulate violence again and again. And I see it also as one of my goals in the far future, I mean, very possibly.
Thank you. Thank you, Dana, and thank you particularly for showing these images in the exhibition in Kmytov. our audience generally does not know how overwhelming the history of Soviet art is, that every museum, presents those enormous, monumental, figurative paintings of war, and that in their shadow, kind of your education is taking place. But also it's telling a lot that a museum in Kmytov had an exhibition. It was in 2019, right? Where these paintings were juxtaposed with artworks by feminist artists, not only yourself, right? It was a group show.
Yes. There were also works by Vlada Ralko, for example, that is also taking part in our show.
Right. So that speaks a lot about the whole context and the conversation that is going on in Ukraine today, and how actually visible feminist art has become. Do you want to add anything about the drawings? We will certainly come back to them in questions, so that's okay.
Yeah, I could also add a bit about the context of the bigger project, but yes. I could also do it a bit later.
Go ahead, talk.
Okay, yes. These drawings were actually the start of my work on this big film that I think I'm still in process of doing it. And this project consists of 4 parts, 4 novels, and I thought I conceived it as an attempt to gather the woman's experience during the ultimate military times, the times of military violence. And these were novels about the Holocaust in Lviv, the Chechen deportation in 1944, the war in Bosnia, and the war in Donbass. And it is not very obvious what do all these histories have in common, but actually all of them are in a way returning in a way. For example, the deportation of Chechens processed by Stalin also returned as the unlived memory during the Chechen wars in 1990s. And also the Bosnian War had a lot of references to the history of the Second World War in Yugoslavia. And I think that the war in Donbass also has a lot of references and quotations turning us back to our own history from the start of the 20th century. And in a way, it is also about avoiding blind spots and about an attempt to outspeak the history as its whole, to not leave any wounds untreated. And also the point of entering this history lies or can be located in the human body, as I thought back then. And this history had to be told in a form of a monologue of a victim that is inside the narrative of the film resurrected and gives her historical testimony about all these times. And in there lies a very important thought for me about the history that doesn't contain any truth. So I think that history doesn't actually have a truth or a fact. It is very important how it is written and who writes the history. And in my imagination, the power to write history has to be given away to the ones that were deprived of it for thousands of years, to the oppressed, to women, to the non-whites, to the dead that could be resurrected in the end, and do this and tell the history the way they would like to, so that we could follow their word to the end. And so I work a lot with inversing history and also inversing archival footage, and also in a way misrepresenting the facts in order to create this model of history being not a space of the facts, but more a space of imagination, a space for utopia. And I can also, we managed to film a bit of the first part. And these are some of the stills from the film. This is the part of the story of the Holocaust in Lviv.
And once again, the film that you're referring is going to be titled Mother Srebrenica, Mother Donbas.
Yes.
And that's a big overarching theme that you've been working on for a couple of years now.
Yeah, it is the 4th year going with this project. But also almost all the other works I do are somewhat connected to it in this way or another.
Right. So both the drawings and the film that we have in the exhibition, but we'll talk about it in a moment. So as all of you can already realize, Olia and Dana have very different approaches to art, both different mediums and different stories. What really sort of unites them is the fact that they're both the youngest artists in the show, and that's both of them have 2 works in the exhibition, and that happened in a magical way, especially in the case of Olia's work. We've already selected the photograph that she has just discussed, and then I kept exchanging or looking at her Instagram. We kept exchanging, or maybe that was the moment when we started exchanging often texts and short messages. And I noticed she started posting these poem prayers, and I asked whether there would be a chance to get one to New York. And that's it. It was a long story how it got here, but it got here, and it is in the exhibition. And in many ways, it is this like most direct physical document of the war going on as we speak, not a historical war, but something that still produces pain and damage. So could you talk about the series of your poems and the one in the show?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll share the screen now. So yeah, there's like mostly I work with the landscapes, but often I refer to text, to handwriting. Like for me, it's like writing practices are very meditative and very much about self-therapy. But through these writings, I can somehow also to communicate with the viewers who just read what I write, and they can share some feelings, because at the end, not our experiences in some points are not very different, but some people just tell me that, oh, that's something I feel too, but I couldn't find words to express it. And in that point, when the war started, the full-scale war started on 24th of February, I was in Kharkiv, and which was like heavily bombed at the time. And to cope with the situation somehow, with the fact that I have to spend my time in the bomb shelter, and to stay effective and productive, to somehow raise awareness of the people internationally through my social media, somehow like doing this informational work, I came up with the thought that what keeps me sane is rage, it's anger. It's something some emotion that is very productive in many specialists in psychology. They say just turn your emotions into anger and do something with it. I wanted to like express my anger somehow. And yeah, as soon as I couldn't work with the landscapes, and I don't know if I'm able to work with the Ukrainian landscapes in the future, because like first it's like some landscapes cannot be reached. They are dangerous, can be mined or full of, you know, like burned tanks and stuff. And secondly, the like Ukrainian landscapes for a long time changed their connotations, their like meanings, like totally. There, I feel that no landscape in Ukraine is like not about the war. So if you work with the landscapes in Ukraine, we would work with the war. Like no matter if you want it or not. So, and I decided to refer to writing practices as like, yeah, that was self-therapy, therapeutic practice that I needed, and something that I could do in the bomb shelter. So, but I didn't have any paper of proper size that I felt that I need. I only have like small, like regular small pieces of paper, and like this, like just practical reason why I chose the textile for that, because it was the only thing I had that I could write on. So the first works were just like on textile because I didn't have other options. And I started just writing these poems that were composed of the words that I like of rage that I had inside me. Yeah, and then I just got the feedback that people could share these feelings with me. I'm just was the one who composed these words of rage into a nice, I don't know, composition, and visualize that. So like, for example, like this is the first, the very first work from this series, and it says, I won't go, I won't fall, I will stand. I won't let you shed my blood. The only blood you will see will be yours. Bite me and you'll warn your teeth on me. Tear me and you'll crash your claws on me. Beat me and you will break yourself. I will stand and I'm standing, and you'd better run while you can. So this one was on February, like months after the invasion started, 24th of March. And like this one is that is exhibited on the show. It was like third or fourth piece in this series, and it says, may you choke on my soil, may you poison yourself with my air, may you drown in my waters, may you burn in my sunlight, may you stay restless all day and all night long, and may you be afraid every second. So it was like some poems were kind of like curses, like some ancient, I don't know, prayers that I heard. Yeah, that I heard a lot, like from, you know, from books, from just some from my grandparents. And I remember then that I found the like among the in the documents of my grandparents, I found the little piece of paper with a prayer, with the like really handmade, not non-traditional, non-Christ, like mixed of Orthodox Christian tradition with something like, you know, ancient beliefs. And I really felt this connection. It's like then when you want to like put your rage as a, you know, power in your curse, like in like magic, something. Yeah. So and I've done like 10 poems, but many of these poems are split on 2 or 4 pieces of a textile. And the last one that finished, like completed this series I made just before I had to leave Ukraine in May, and this is it. So it has a totally, I would say, totally another mood or something, and it says, "My Lord, please give me strength to always remember who I am and to resist those who want to force me to become who I am not. Don't let me ever forget my roots, but also don't let the past engulf me. Give me enough rage to keep fighting, and may pain and anger not poison my soul anymore. Come to me and do not leave me when I'm vulnerable. Give me the merciful dreams and save me from horrible nightmares. Amen." So that's it about this work.
Because you wrote it, Olia, you're probably the only person in the world who can read it with a straight voice, not breaking, because it's your work. It's quite amazing how I'm very happy that you spoke about anger and rage. Even, for me being at the other end of the world and absolutely safe, in processing the first hours, days, weeks of this invasion, I was struggling between, my pacifism and my anger and my fury. And it was very interesting for me to see that like when one reads, and I encourage all of you who watch this conversation to go to Olia Fedorova's website and read all the poems. It's very interesting how they develop over time, how the feelings change, and what kind of document of internal landscape they become, right? And there is, of course, a very strong connection between the two of you, because both of you write, and we will talk a little bit specifically about poetry later. But the film that Dana Kavelina has in our exhibition has almost entire text, or maybe the entire text is written by Dana as a kind of stream of consciousness poem. So I would like Dana to introduce her film now, and then we can talk a little bit about poetry and other things.
Sure. Is there sound?
I don't hear sound yet.
Sorry.
Yes.
There will be sound. Sorry, yes.
It is silent.
Твою левую ногу понесло на север, а правую на юг. Твоя голова зависла в воздухе и плачет деревянными пулями. Зубы твои давно высыпались, а сигарета ходит туда-сюда, как метроном. Я так хочу, чтобы ты погибла. Тогда твои губы, быть может, все же принесет к моему порогу. В конце концов, люди постоянно так делают. Люди производят свет. Люди не умеют делать так, как делает солнце. Они произвели бомбы и придумали обстрелы, чтобы сообщать друг другу свет, чтобы были целые волны света, чтобы летали курицы и разная тварь Божья, чтобы была в Донбассе песня. Неразумные Донбасса греют друг друга, что не умеют иначе.
Thank you.
Should I tell a bit about the film?
Yes,
Or
yes.
Is there a concrete question?
No, please tell us a little bit about the film. Just introduce it in your own words, what's important for you in that work and what it is, and then we'll follow up with questions.
Well, I started doing this film 2.5 years ago while preparing the 4th part of my full feature film, which had to be also about Donbass. But actually, I revealed such a huge quantity of footage of different kind and also of different time that I somehow understood that there has to be a separate space for what I want to say about Donbass. And so in this way, this film was created. And I use a lot of different footage in it, and this is very important part of the film because it is somehow bringing different epochs and different times in Donbass to speak with each other and to create a conversation. And for me, it was very important that the war and the violence in Donbass is not new to this land, because Donbass was a historical point of so many contradictions we still encounter in Ukraine that, as I thought back then, Donbass is a crystal through which we can see almost everything that we have to still fight. In 1920s and 1930s, Donbass was a place of inexhaustible labor enthusiasm and also unimaginable overexploitation. And the history of Donbass also unfolds into the history of colonization, because the first mines and the first mines were actually brought there by a Britishman, John Hughes, and originally Donetsk, one of the central cities, was called Yuzovka, and also there was a lot of other foreigners bringing people to work there. And in Stalin's time, it was a point of terrible repressions and poverty, misery, epidemics, and hunger. And then after the 1930s, the time of terrible repressions, there comes Second World War. So this is the place of tens of years of suffering. And after that, when we see the footage from 1970s, when Donetsk becomes a prosperous city and a kind of gets the name and the myth of the city of million roses, and we see all these actual roses, and also happy people walking around parks, and also the children's railway system, which was a kind of pride of Donetsk. We understand how people have their agency to overcome the history itself. And this gave me a lot of hope, because in a way I felt, and I think others also do feel, this despair when the two footages are coming together with a gap of 100 years, where there are tanks in Donbass and there are tanks again in Donbass after the city becomes prosperous, and also after these peaceful cities are erected again and then destroyed again. And somehow I'm sure that it will happen once more. But this also, it is important for me that this film was an attempt to speak about history, but also about the fragility of the women's body in the spaces of military violence. But in a way, the addressee of this film was Ukrainian society the most. What's more, the Ukrainian society is a multiplicity of different forces and of different political agencies. While now I see this film as something that is losing its relevance, because somehow I feel that the space for history and the space for the historical discussions has imploded, or collapsed, and there is no space for that anymore. And also, in a way, there is no one to debate with in the questions of the Donbas history, because the war produces us as a totality, and in a way, Ukrainians stand as one in a row, and there is nothing to debate on with each other. And I think that the struggle and the war that is going right now is also the fight for the right to have history, or the right to debate around history. Because if we cannot defend ourselves and preserve Ukraine, then there will be no history, and there will be also no one to write history and to rewrite it. And that is why, in a way, we have to struggle to produce the space to speak about Donbas again. Well, now too many people live in completely altered temporality, in the temporality of very small fragments, a day after a day, or an hour and an hour and another hour. And there is never a space to think too much about the past.
Thank you, Dana. Yeah, you spoke so eloquently about what I've been thinking about putting this exhibition together, that the war effort sort of conflated Ukraine to one thing, one-dimensional, both victim and enemy of Russia, and it just, war efforts flattens everything. You just have one function, to defend yourself. Well, all these nuances that are present in your work and Olia's works and Evgenia Belarus's and Alevtina and everybody who is in this exhibition are kind of frozen for the moment. But I was thinking that we, because of the presence of artists in society, that this conversation can be sort of preserved outside of the war effort, and it will continue once peace comes back, and hopefully it will, right? I mean, we do hope for this. So I, even more than ever before, I'm more and more aware, looking at your works and the depth of your analysis of the reality engulfing you, what role art plays in the time of war. And that is actually the subject of our exhibition, that historiography, and specifically a potential for female historiography, and whether it is, what does it tell us, without even posing necessarily a suggestion that it would be completely different from what we know from history, from all the Homers and the Bible language and the Sumerian tables. Well, if women wrote history for all those years, would, I am tempted always to ask, would war even be the central theme of history? It's wonderful to theorize, and I don't know that we can answer these questions, but I know that are important for you. Let's start from Dana, because for Dana, this is a major question, a question about historiography and whose voice is heard. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think I partly talked about this question before, but I constantly think, what kind of memory, what can this memory look like after the war ends? How can we preserve all the complexity of what is going on right now on so many different levels? And when I also used to think a lot about monuments as also the object preserving memory. And when I try to imagine a utopian monument, it could be a kind of endless matrix or a network of texts that can also be embodied in names that are endlessly alive and overlapping, and an imagined space where no voice is too weak to be heard, and no voice is excluded, and there are no voices that we won't ever hear. No one is silenced in this imagined space of memory. And I think that it is also what we have to struggle for, because so many voices will be attempted to be silenced, and so many voices can be left unheard after the war. And this kind of unheard voices, this kind of ghosts that are hunting us for all our lives, they stay and they do not go, and sometimes they demand answers in, well, like when 100 years passes. And I see this also as a reason why violence can return. And for me, outspeaking the whole lot of the terror and memory and one's most nightmarish experience is the way to get the wounds treated and closed forever. And I think, I mean, to imagine this work of mine in the nearest or the not nearest future is also such a privilege of giving away the responsibility to fight in the field. And this is somehow very positive to think that I will have the right to work on it, because someone has to die for me. Also to have this privilege to think about memory and also to create a monument or something like that. And nowadays, the time there is only for the simplest and also the most difficult things of doing things on the ground. But I mean, if there ever will be a future for us, I think I will, I see my work as the struggle for the biggest voices. And I think that these biggest voices is the historiography we need to invent.
Thank you, Dana. That's a very, very pronounced concept of actually feminist historiography. It doesn't focus on women. It does give a hope to everyone, to everybody who was overlooked or would be overlooked, unheard, or silenced. And as you develop your ideas, it's also clear that this is how you manifest them visually in your works, the collage structure that you use. You also talk a lot about matrix, that all of those stories would kind of create a matrix. Olia, I don't want to impose the interest in feminist historiography on you. You, in your work, you spoke a little bit about what tremendous role art played for you in keeping you sane. So there are many other, and others, not just yourself, right? Art is in service in a way, very often, and especially in situations of crisis like this. Dana speaks about the privilege of being able to be an artist rather than have to die on a war front. What can you tell us from your perspective, especially that you stayed for so long in a situation of direct danger in Kharkiv, about art in crisis, in a war crisis?
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. Actually, I remember the time before, just before the full-scale war started, those like several months when, like, since Russian troops started gathering around our borders, and you could feel this menace, like atmosphere of waiting for something in the air. And at this time, I guess everyone was thinking what each of us will be doing if the war starts. And I remember I felt like really broken because of this uncertainty, and because of understanding that I thought that I'm, as an artist, would be the most useless person in this war. I even thought like, okay, probably I should take up arms or learn how to, do the like first medical aid or something. Yeah, it seemed for me like that way I would be more useful for my country rather than continuing the art practice. And like, yeah, it seemed that continuing the art, making art during the war, it seemed like something that you cannot do, like something that it's not from the war life, it's from some like life that wouldn't exist anymore. Though I understood that, like I knew myself that I cannot like easily just take up the machine gun and go like to fight somewhere and kill people for real. It's like we understand that really it's not that funny that maybe some people see in the TikToks or something. It's like a really hard work that breaks people. So yeah, but when the war started and it was clear that there is nothing in between, just like white and black, like, or you rather die or you survive. And I came to like the understanding that first of all, with my doing art and continuing doing something just helps me in my survival, and it helps me to do something for my country, because as an artist I can appeal to people's like feelings. They like people outside Ukraine. I just noticed it. They really engage more into some personal experience, which can be delivered through art in a very nice way, rather than they did not engage with the news, with some journalists' works, like just that just in a very dry way describe what is going on. So the artists are capable of showing this like reality through their own personal experience and view, and to strike other people right in the heart, to make them do something for Ukraine, to make them go on the streets, I don't know, donate money, help refugees, and do everything. So that's why I feel that I stayed in Kharkiv for so long, because I felt that I need to be there till the point when it's possible to deliver this personal experience. I felt that as soon as I can do that, because the shelter when I was staying was rather safe, if we can use this word actually, but I knew that I have a lower chances to die. So I can use this possibility until I can use it. So and it's I was thinking while you were talking about the feminism and female art, this is this war is a unique situation when actually it's not like something that was meant to do, but men cannot leave the country, so only women can go abroad, only female artists can go abroad and be the living like representators of this personal experience. They can speak out for their male colleagues, present their art. I know a lot of colleagues that who bring to Europe and to the US, they bring the artworks of male artists, but they speak like in even like not even online, but they this opportunity for the people not from Ukraine to speak with a living person from Ukraine is something that people from Ukraine should use, because this conversation, this contact is valuable, and it brings people to help Ukraine and not to stop thinking of Ukraine and discussing Ukraine, which is very important.
I'm very grateful that you talked about reality of war in a very simple way. You know, this particular audience that you're speaking to, we here in the United States, this is a country that does not have an imminent history of invasion on its territory. I mean, there was a war in the 19th century that was civil war fought directly on its territory, but there is not really, except for 9/11, which event again is just one event that is geographically and in terms of the number of victims limited. There is no experience of a total destruction and no place to hide, also no place to hide in terms of choices that you can make. And I think that it's very, very important that you speak about your experience in this way to people who cannot even potentially imagine. I mean, there is always, you know, you can't imagine what you would do, but in situations like this, all of this imagination is worth nothing because there are only two things you can do. So I don't want to take more of space with my questions. We ran a little bit over time, but I really wanted you to speak as long as you wanted to speak, to deliver your thoughts fully. And I think we can turn to the audience and ask for their questions, what they want to know from you. Emma, do you have questions from our audience?
Yeah, okay, so it looks like we have two questions. The first says, congratulations to you both for such profoundly moving, powerful work. This is a sort of open-ended question to you both. An aspect that I find in your works that so speak to me is the vulnerability, be it in content, materials, etc. Can you speak to this as part of a larger language emerging?
Who wants to speak first?
I can start.
Go ahead, Dana.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot actually about the power of vulnerability. And when I thought about the vulnerability as a kind of central image of my work as well, I was actually always imagining a plant or something that is ultimately vulnerable, a small flower or the big structure, and the power of it, that these big structures are not so easy to destroy. I mean, there is no wind that can destroy a flower, because it is like vulnerable to an extent, and there are not, it is so vulnerable that it is so hard to break as well. And in a way also a lot of these images and metaphors emerge in Ukrainian folk songs and also in poetry, and it is also often about plants being bent by wind or by wood or something, and then like standing after time again. And I thought about this power of weak structures a lot, but for me now it doesn't help a lot. And I think that the vulnerability is a kind of a very good skill to also learn to be this strong and difficult structure. And in order to fight, you always have to preserve the parts of the vulnerable parts in order for time not to destroy you in a way. But I was thinking that except vulnerability, I have to research other structures to fight.
Thank you. Olia?
Yeah, I agree with Dana actually about like this kind of vulnerability, like idea of that you need vulnerability to be able to fight. Because yeah, and it's not just in the art perspective. I felt it a lot when I was in Kharkiv. You like yes, to be able to fight and survive, you need to like in the most of like the situations, you need to get rid of the unnecessary like emotions, to concentrate, to like put all your efforts, all your mental efforts or your physical efforts to the only aim, only goal to survive. While it works for the first time for a certain period, but then and that's what is like most horrible in the war, which is continuing. Your resources are exhausting. You cannot be a fighter, you cannot be a warrior forever. And just you need to regain your vulnerability. You regain your like ability to feel something, at least something that was like a really unnecessary in terms of survival. Because yeah, like so simply speaking, first during the first week of the war, I don't remember like eating much. And because this adrenaline that was meant like just to survive, it could like it substituted any other requirements of the body, of the like mind. And the only way for me to to stay in a proper condition, I would say, it was to unfortunately to leave Ukraine, while many people just don't have this option. I feel like a privileged person that I'm able to leave, and I'm able to stay in some safe place where I can bit by bit start like being vulnerable again. And it's like a really tragical thing. We are going to have a lot of people who fought all this time like greatly, but you cannot fight during your entire life, during the very long periods of time. At some point, it's like with this like metaphor with the flower, to resist this power of of the enemy's boot, you need to like make your skin firm, like you need to turn into a rock flower. But as soon as like your skin gets more and more firm, it's easy to break. So yes. Yeah, that's kind of a very interesting concept, but very sad at the same time.
Yeah, if I can add something, I completely agree with Olia at this point. And I was also just sitting and thinking, synchronized with you about also the privilege to expose one's vulnerability, because actually almost all the bodies are vulnerable in the territory of war. There are, of course, the endless continuum and the levels of vulnerability, like women's bodies are more vulnerable, and aged women's bodies are even more vulnerable, and disabled aged women's bodies, and so on. And but actually exposing vulnerability and thinking of it as about like strength or power, this is a big privilege. And too many people now are deprived of the right to be vulnerable, or to feel, or to, I don't know, expose this vulnerability to some other human being or to the world, like artists do in a way. So now I also rethink and reconsider the question of vulnerability, because like if also I imagine my body as a flower in the past, so now this flower has to learn to hold a gun as well.
Emma, do we have other questions?
Yes, thank you both for answering. Okay, we have another one. Do each of the artists write about their work? I ask because their experiences, sources, and concepts seem so powerful and invaluable. And then another thank you for your work and for participating in the exhibition. So yeah, so I guess, do you write about your work ever, or your experiences, or how they tie into your process?
Olia? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yeah, I can answer for myself that text and writing is like an integral part of my work. I can imagine any of my artworks without any written piece, which is like not often it's not like a description or curatorial text or whatever. It's the part of the work, though it's more like for me, like as a part of artistic process. So it's the texts are not like really theoretical or something. They are just other part of other element of the work, just in words. Yeah, I think the theoretical writings are better to give to the curators or people who are experienced in that, who are professionals and can view the artwork from the outside perspective somehow. Yeah. That's
Dana,
from
what
me,
do you say to this?
Yes, if it is about film, I have an interview that is translated into English. I think it is somewhere on IFAX. And for me, this interview, like I felt it was quite profound for me. I was quite content with what for a text is there. But in other questions, sometimes I don't, I'm never on time with writing texts about what I do or about other of my pieces. Like it is sometimes very hard to synchronize with oneself also. So I think there are some texts, but I don't write a lot.
Yeah, that interview is a very useful source of information. Maybe that's also a moment to mention that because the exhibition will travel, which we already know, it will also have a catalog. We will work on this in August, and the catalog will include my text about the show, but will also have a as large bibliography as I can put there. I mean, everything that I used, but also some additional literature that covers both the historical context of what's going on and specifically feminist art in Ukraine and the sort of wartime art, what was created during this couple of last years. There's quite some literature available in English, and it's dispersed in many, sometimes bilingual publications. And this efflux interview that you mentioned is exquisite, and I used it a lot. It was one of the first things I read about you, so it was very, very helpful. But if we're talking about writing, maybe you should also say, Olia covered that part already about writing being part of your artwork. And if I'm not mistaken, you've written the entire text for your film, right?
Yes, I always write all the text for my films. And actually all my films start from the text. So first I write text, which is not actually a script. It is always a kind of a poetic monologue. And then I try to envision it. And only then I can imagine it as a moving image and not before. So
right.
This is the ultimately important thing for me, to write a text.
That's very interesting. There are more artworks in the exhibition where I'm actually thinking of it now, that so many artists in Ukraine find text and poetry or song an important part of the artwork content. Both Yevgenia Belarusets and Alevtina Kakidze, for example, in their works, text is also omnipresent, always. Emma, do we have other questions?
Yeah, we have one last question for you.
So let's
Donna.
run through this question. If anybody has to leave, it's 2:17. Please leave, but for the sake of those who can stay with us, let's answer one more question.
Okay, let's see. So, okay, this one is for you, Donna. It's do you have a written piece? Oh, let's see. Oh, never mind. Okay, they resubmitted the same question into the Q&A. Never mind.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Good. I actually forgot that we have your essay now, Monika, which is very good, and also got to know so many things about myself from it. So I think it would be a great.
Thank you. As you all know, I've never had to write an essay in such a short time with so much new material. So that was, you know. Curating at war is what making art at war is, to a certain extent, with the whole difference that it makes that my eye is completely external to the war, to the pain, and to everything that fills your work.